So the next topic that I want to talk about is the hypocrisy of the left-wing political establishment right across the Western world. Thank you. The political elites in this country have whipped up a frenzy of hatred against those people on the right of politics. We saw expressions of that in the way that they villainized people like Tommy Robinson. They said that he was a racist. He's no such thing. They incited a riot against his political rallies in the north, where they escorted a Muslim mob that attacked women and children with bricks and scissors and knives. And when they were inciting that kind of hatred, the kind of hatred that saw milkshakes getting thrown on people like Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson, they were all applauding it. They were all saying how amazing it was, or their condemnation was silent. But then, it looked like they might get milkshakes thrown at them. And Boris Johnson started using words like betrayal, which leads to conclusions like treason and traitors. And then all of a sudden, our left-wing political class started getting death threats. And all of a sudden, that kind of hyperbolic language became illegitimate, because suddenly they could be subject to the violence that they were inciting against the people that they were calling racists and Nazis and fascists. So when they were calling people racists, Nazis and fascists and inciting mobs and militant terrorist groups like Antifascista to attack people in the street, it was okay. But when they themselves started to become villainized and started to worry that they themselves might receive some of the violence that they had been busily inciting against other people, suddenly it was wrong. The left-wing establishment of this country are hypocrites. They are hypocrites and they are cowards. The left-wing hypocrites want to accuse you of being a fascist or a racist or a bigot if you want to stand up against the Islamists who are persecuting Christians around the world. If you want to stand up against the terrorist networks, they want to villainize you. But these same groups are silent when those terrorist organizations bomb churches packed full of people, kill women and children, kidnap Christian girls, force them to convert to Islam, rape them. These same bigots want to tell us a narrative that we Christians should be ashamed of the colonial past. And there is no lie, the Christian history connected to colonialism is murky. But they use that history to beat us over the head so that we Christians are ashamed of ourselves. But these same left-wing hypocrites are silent about an Islamic slave trade that has gone on for 1400 years and still goes on today. These left-wing hypocrites talk about the occupation of Israel of the Palestinian territories. But they are silent about Turkey's occupation of northern Cyprus or of Allied forces' occupation of Kosovo, Serbia, or of Azerbaijan's occupation of Armenian territories. They want to tell us Christians that we should be ashamed of things like the Inquisition and the witch trials. And for sure, the witch trials are something that we Christians have to do a mea culpa over. And the Inquisition is a complicated piece of history. They tell us that we have to be ashamed of the Crusades, but there's no mention of 1400 years of jihad against Christian communities around the entire world. There's no commemoration of the Armenian genocide, no even acknowledgement that the Armenian genocide occurred, or of the genocide that happened against Chaldean Assyrian Christians that has continued since the Muslims occupied their lands. There is no mention of the fact that Christian churches are being burned right across France today. But if you so much as graffiti on a mosque, you'll have days and days of lecturing about Islamophobia. Now let me be clear. I'm not trying to legitimize, I'm not trying to say that the ill actions of one justifies ill actions in the other direction. I'm not doing that. I am simply exposing the hypocrisy of a left-wing narrative that dominates our political discourse in the West. They are silent about the fact that churches were being burned in France. But if you burn down a mosque, everyone from Angela Merkel right through to Boris Johnson will talk about the evils of Islamophobia. But churches are regularly burnt down in Egypt. Churches are regularly burnt down in Pakistan. A country that Britain gives hundreds of millions of pounds worth in aid is a country that can afford nuclear weapons but yet can't afford to defend Christians in Pakistan. It can afford to pick fights with another nuclear power in India, but it can't afford the security to defend innocent Christian communities right across Pakistan. And your country, your government is giving them aid. The left wing are hypocrites. There is no discourse about Christophobia in our country. They'll talk about anti-Semitism. They'll talk about Islamophobia, but they won't talk about Christophobia. And Christians, if you're a Christian and you can hear my voice, if you're a Christian and you can hear what I'm saying, I want to say to you, it is your fault. You're to blame. You have not stood up for your community vehemently enough. You have not been filled with zeal for the house of the Lord, as Christ was, as the apostles remembered in John chapter 2. And you have forgotten that the house of the Lord is the Christian community. So when Christians are being persecuted, that is your fight. The scriptures say that do good to all men, but especially those in the house of faith. Well, right now, those in the house of faith are being raped, their churches are being burned, their churches are being bombed, their daughters are being kidnapped, they are being discriminated against in the workplace, they are being ostracized in society, they are being denied the rights of refugee status across the Western world, whilst Muslims are being allowed in without any check or hindrance. They are being discriminated against in our foreign policy. They are being discriminated against in the way that we give aid to the foreign world. And you Christians have been silent, whilst your brothers and sisters have been murdered by the tens of thousands in Sudan, by the tens of thousands in Pakistan over the years, in Syria and Iraq. You've been silent because you've been led by cowards. And I'm not talking about the politicians. Most of those are hypocrites by profession. I'm talking about the bishops, the people who are supposed to lead the Christian community and would rather sell the church down the river so that they can look good in front of the political class rather than do their duty and speak up for the dying martyrs of the church. Perfect. Christians, rediscover your balls. Get a backbone. Stand up for yourselves. Stand up for your own community and identity. rediscover a Christian political narrative that is not liberalism, that is not capitalism, that is not socialism, that is not nationalism, but a Christian political narrative that is based upon the identity as Christians. So, before I move on to my next topic, are there any questions?
It wasn't a mosque but a synagogue last week in Halle, but the Muslims were killed in the kebab shop afterwards.
Okay, so the man talks about a synagogue that was burnt down and Muslims that were killed afterwards. I can't comment on this story because I don't know that story. But let me ask you, sir, and let me ask everyone else, does the fact that some Muslims are suffering from Islamophobia here justify the silence about Christophobia? Justify the silence that there are anti-Christian pogroms that happen in Egypt on a yearly basis? That there are anti-Christian pogroms that happen in Pakistan on a yearly basis? That we have just watched in the last 5 years an organised attempt by Muslim radicals to annihilate the Christian community completely in Pakistan. Does it? No, it doesn't. So I am legitimate in speaking about it. Next question. Any other questions, or shall I move on to my next topic? Okay.